Hello everybody and welcome back to Handsome German, the only show on the internet. Today I'm here to talk to you about Whisker Squadron Survivor, which entered early access a couple of days ago. I sunk about 20 hours into the demo back when it was still up, and have put another 4.5 hours into the early access version. And I think I'm about ready to give you some early impressions on how I feel about this game. And yeah, do that just in time before Blasphemous 2 comes out and eats up all of my time. So what is Whisker Squadron Survivor? As you can see from the footage, it is a Star Fox-like corridor shooter, but it blends that particular genre with the bullet heaven, Vampire Survivor style gameplay that a lot of people enjoy from the originator Vampire Survivors. Except in this game, you don't become as absurdly overpowered, and enemies do pose a far greater threat. Which, depending on how you feel about bullet heaven games, is going to be either a huge plus or defeating the entire point of the genre. Now, usually games like this work by pitting you against hordes of enemies. Those enemies drop experience, you pick up the experience to get upgrades, kind of like in a roguelike or a roguelite. And those upgrades obviously make you more powerful, allow you to fire more bullets all at the same time, and that ramps up alongside the number of enemies you're going to have to take down. Now, usually those games are top-down, you just kind of walk around and auto-fire. In this game, you actually have to manage your energy resource that you use for boosting and firing. It refills very quickly once you stop shooting and boosting, so it's very rarely a big problem. But it does kind of discourage you from just holding down the shoot button all the time, because if you do that, your energy isn't going to recharge at all. And that about covers the basics of the game. Now, obviously a very important aspect of the genre are the power-ups, and those are all fairly useful. Most of them. There's one that I picked in this run that you're seeing right now called, I think, the Boost Bomb, which basically charges up an explosion while you're boosting, and after so and so many seconds, if you let go of the boost button, there's a explosion centered on your ship that deals pretty good damage and has pretty good range. But honestly, most of the time, it just makes more sense to shoot than to boost if you're trying to keep up the combo. But obviously that's situational, and sometimes I guess it could be useful. I guess. Another thing that's kind of a problem with the game right now, I think personally, is that the magnet power-up is by far the most powerful, because it allows you to pick up items and experience from further away, and it can be upgraded to ridiculous range over time. Now, the reason why I think that's a problem is because if you have magnet, you're going to be way higher level at the end of a run than if you don't have it. Meaning that any run in which you don't get magnet randomly is going to be less ridiculously overpowered than a run in which you do get it. But I guess they had to find a balance somewhere in the pickup range and the upgraded pickup ranges So it's really not a deal breaker. But considering that there are a bunch of different power-ups, the fact that there's only two that I have a problem with, and one that I have a problem with because it's too good, that speaks volumes of how well balanced and how well thought out the individual upgrades are. Now, a couple more things that I think are worth addressing are obviously, and I'm just gonna keep this short because it's not really constructive feedback, it's just kind of a thumbs up. The controls in this game are 100% on point. It feels great to fly around, tilting your ship. They even created the tight boost mechanic where there's particularly narrow gaps in certain walls where if you manage to fly through them while boosting, you normally don't get anything from what I know, but there are a number of upgrades that will give you temporary double damage or temporary infinite energy or heal you whenever you perform a tight boost. So those little gaps in the walls start off as completely useless and a needless risk, but if you want to play that way, they can become incredibly useful power-ups for you to essentially pick up on your way through the level. So controls are great, and the fact that they introduced a tight boost mechanic shows that they know how on point the controls in this game are. And the controls are obviously by far the most important aspect of almost any type of game, but especially an arcade 3D shmup like Star Fox, like Whisker, Squadron, Survivor. Now, another thing I do want to talk about briefly is the fact that the music still feels like it's placeholder. It's very subdued, it's not very pumping. If you compare it, I'm just going to shut up for a couple seconds. So if you compare it to the soundtrack of the Star Fox games, for example, where tracks like Corneria from Star Fox 1 or the Star Wolf theme, if you compare it to those kinds of bangers, this music is obviously a little bit underwhelming in my opinion. It lacks punch, it lacks force behind it. Everything is very smooth, but that's just a personal opinion. You might love the soundtrack, and honestly, after a couple of runs, you're probably going to start listening to podcasts or other music while playing the game anyway, but still worth considering. Now, the final point of criticism that I have with the game is that I don't like the protagonist anymore. In the demo originally, there were some nice exchanges between Olivia and her, I guess, handler. One of my favorite exchanges is the handler, Gigi, or Gigi, I'm not sure, saying, oh, it's only going to get worse from here, and Olivia saying, don't say that. And that's kind of endearing, because it gives you that impression of a young pilot who is way out of her depth in the battle that she found herself in. Now, in the early access version, Gigi will still say it's only going to get worse from here, but Olivia will say bring it on. And that is fine. That is fine if that was the only change. But she also talks about being the top of her class, being the best of the best. And if you compare that to Star Fox characters, for example, that's the way Falco talks. He is an asshole. Whenever Fox talks about how awesome he is, he doesn't say that he's awesome, he says that Team Star Fox is awesome. And that's just a lot more endearing in my opinion. Now, I haven't really played much with the other two characters yet, so I don't know if they're any better. I assume they must be. But I just don't like Olivia the way she is right now. Maybe in Whisker Squadron, weirdly enough, the original game that this game is a spin-off of, but the original game hasn't come out yet. Maybe there she'll be more of a team player, which is always going to be just more endearing than, you know, a cocky asshole. Finally, the Steam Deck aspect of this game. 99% of the time, and that's the reason why I always have the frame rate counter up in the top left, because I know a lot of people are going to want to know. And I'm kind of basing the new identity of the channel around playing games on the Steam Deck, because I think it's a niche that's worth filling. 90% of the time, the game will be above 40 FPS, so if you want to just lock it to 40, you can do that. I had it up to 60 just to see how well it would do. And most of the time, yeah, it's at 60 or above 40 at least. But there was some moments, there was one in particular that I experienced where the frame rate dropped down to the teens, which is really not great. But as you can see, there's a lot happening in this game, especially towards the end. The first 5 zones are usually 60 FPS the whole way through, and then any zone after that progressively runs more and more poorly. That's fine, I guess. It's understandable, the game's in early access. The Steam Deck is not the most powerful machine in the world, so I'm not holding that against the developer at all, because, you know, Steam Deck players are a minority, so targeting the Steam Deck specifically early on in development doesn't necessarily have to be a priority. But for anyone looking to get into the game, to buy it in early access, just keep in mind that the game will struggle a little bit here and there. Overall though, Whisker Squadron Survivor is an incredibly fun Star Fox-like game. I know I mostly talked about negatives, but it's kind of how I talk about games that I like. I just tell you the things that aren't good and let you assume that everything else is either fine or great. And I think that's it. That's all. If you found this video informative, entertaining, or good to fall asleep to, make sure you like and subscribe. Next up is Blasphemous 2, which is a game that I'm looking forward to quite a bit. And I have to stop recording now so I can open my window back up, because I am dying of heat. And that isn't fun. Unlike Whisker Squadron Survivor, which is a lot of fun. So, thank you very much for watching once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.